September 24th, 1944. The skies above Borneo burned. Hundreds of Japanese planes waited below, but only one man came to meet them. A quiet farm boy from Wisconsin, now flying alone, armed with nothing but calm nerves and a strange flying trick no one believed could work. Pilots said it was suicide. Commanders called it impossible. But that impossible move would soon make him the most successful fighter pilot in American history, a man who destroyed 40 Japanese planes almost entirely on his own. How did a shy farm kid turn a twin-engine plane into a weapon the enemy feared by name? And what secret skill did he use to win every fight before it even began? Stay with me, because this story isn't just about war, it's about genius, courage, and the power of patience in the sky. If you love true World War II stories, make sure to like this video, subscribe to support the channel, and watch till the end. You won't believe how it ends. The boy who would one day destroy 40 Japanese planes was not born in a cockpit. He was born in a barn. His name was Richard Dick Bong, a quiet farm kid from Superior, Wisconsin, where winters froze your breath into crystals, and summers smelled of wet hay and oil from old tractors. He wasn't the kind of boy people expected to become a war hero. He was shy, gentle, and happiest when fixing engines or shooting cans off fence posts with his .22 rifle. But there was something behind those calm grey eyes, a deep focus that made his hands steady, even when his heart raced. When America entered World War II, Bong was studying at a local college and taking flying lessons under a government program. Flying felt natural to him. His instructor remembered, he didn't fight the plane, he listened to it. By 1941, he joined the U.S. Army Air Forces, earning his wings at Luke Field, Arizona. There, he met men who would become legends, including future aces like Thomas Maguire. But even among them, Bong was strange. He wasn't loud or proud. He didn't talk about glory or kills. He just loved the machine. His commanding officer once said, Bong wasn't a daredevil, he was a craftsman. He treated flying like plowing a field, straight lines, no waste, just skill. Yet his calmness often looked like disobedience. He practiced stunts the instructors warned against, low passes, barrel rolls over hangars, and buzzing the flight school dorms. One time he flew so low that the wind from his twin engines blew laundry off the line of the base commander's house. He was grounded for days. But even while being punished, his superiors knew he had something special. They wrote in his file, "Instinctive pilot, natural gunner, needs discipline, not discouragement." What separated Bong from others was not speed or strength, it was his focus under pressure. In the classroom, he studied gunnery angles the way a farmer studies the soil. He learned that shooting at moving targets wasn't about chasing them, it was about predicting them. He said once, "If you aim where the enemy is, you already lost." It was a simple rule, but it became the secret behind his impossible trick, a flying method that later made him the deadliest American fighter pilot of the Pacific War. When Bong finally received his assignment overseas, it wasn't to Europe, where everyone wanted to go. He was sent to the Pacific, a place of heat, disease, and long silences between deadly dogfights. He didn't complain. He wrote to his parents, "Don't worry about me. The P-38 feels like home. It talks to me." Before leaving, he spent his last days over Wisconsin fields, gliding low over the farm where he grew up. Neighbors said they could always tell it was Dick's plane. It flew smoother, quieter, as if it belonged to the air itself. He dipped his wings over the Bong family barn and then vanished into the clouds. His mother said later, it was like the wind took him away and gave him back to history. By the time his transport reached New Guinea, the Pacific Air War was at its bloodiest. Japanese pilots ruled the skies with skill and experience. The Americans were learning fast, sometimes too late. New recruits crashed from heat exhaustion before ever meeting the enemy. Fuel shortages meant some planes flew with half tanks and no return plan. But Bong looked at the odds and smiled. Where others saw chaos, he saw patterns. He believed there was always a trick, a better angle, a smarter move, a quieter way to win. His early instructors had once thought his habits were mistakes, his wide turns, his steady bursts, his refusal to panic. But soon those habits would become the foundation of something greater, a style of flying that would let one calm, patient man bring down dozens of planes alone. This wasn't set luck. It wasn't set madness. It was method, learned not in academies, but in farm fields where timing meant everything and waste meant failure. The boy who once herded cows by sound was about to hunt fighter planes the same way, by rhythm, by instinct, by listening to the air. But the calm skies over Wisconsin were nothing compared to what waited over Borneo, New Guinea, where men melted in their cockpits and the jungle swallowed the wrecks whole. And it was there that Bong's quiet genius would be tested for the first time, not in practice, but in fire. When Richard Bong arrived in New Guinea in 1942, he stepped into another world, a world made of steam, mud, and danger. The air felt heavy, like breathing through wet cloth. Mosquitoes buzzed in thick clouds, and the smell of gasoline mixed with rotting jungle plants. Every sound seemed alive, the whine of engines, the rumble of thunder, the distant cry of parrots, and sometimes the sharp crack of anti-aircraft guns far away. The young pilot from Wisconsin now belonged to the 9th Fighter Squadron, 49th Fighter Group, a small band of flyers trying to hold the line against Japan's powerful Zero fighters. Their base was nothing like the clean airfields back home. Here, runway meant a strip of dirt and crushed coral. Tents were hot enough to melt chocolate in minutes. Men slept under mosquito nets, sweating through the night, dreaming of home. But there was no time to rest. Every day, the Japanese launched new attacks on supply convoys and airfields. The Americans were outnumbered, and many had never seen real combat before. Fong wrote to his parents, "This place doesn't feel real. The jungle is so thick that planes disappear if they crash a mile away. It bits like the earth swallows them." He wasn't afraid, but he was learning fast that war was nothing like training. In Arizona, mistakes meant embarrassment. In New Guinea, mistakes meant death. The first time Bong saw a Zero, it came out of the sun like a flash of silver lightning. He turned hard and fired too early. The bullets missed. The Zero's return fire ripped holes through his wing, and Bong barely made it back to base. When he climbed out, his crew chief stared at the bullet holes and said, "Sir, you almost got turned into Swiss cheese." Bong only nodded and whispered, "Next time, I'll wait half a second longer." That small difference, a half second, became part of his method. He began to study his opponents. He watched how the Japanese pilots turned tighter but lost speed. He noticed that their planes, light and agile, couldn't handle steep dives like his P-38 Lightning. Instead of fighting on their terms, Bong chose his own. He started attacking from above, using the Lightning's weight and twin engines to his advantage. In his notebook he wrote, "Speed is armor, patience is aim." His fellow pilots soon noticed that Bong rarely missed. He fired short bursts, just 1 second of fire, enough to destroy but not waste bullets. His gunnery camera footage became training material for new recruits. One officer said, "He was quiet in the air. You could always tell it was Bong. No wasted shots, no wild chases, just clean kills." By the end of his first few months, Bong had scored his first 3 victories. It didn't seem like much, but in the Pacific, every victory mattered. Fuel and supplies were so short that each mission was a gamble. Planes sometimes left with enough gas for 90 minutes, just enough for one fight and one chance to come home. Some didn't set. Wrecks disappeared into the jungle, and friends vanished without a trace. The contrast between Bong's calm nature and the chaos around him grew sharper every day. Others smoked, drank, or joked to forget the stress. Bong sat alone under the wing of his plane, cleaning his guns or adjusting his sights. He treated each mission like a puzzle. He said quietly, "If I do everything right, I don't need luck." The tropical heat baked everything in sight, planes, bullets, even nerves. The ground crew worked shirtless, covered in sweat and oil. Each takeoff kicked up a storm of dust and stones. When a pilot returned safely, The crew would slap the wings of the plane like an old friend. But sometimes only silence returned, and the empty bed in the tent said everything. Despite the danger, Bong never lost his calm. His squadron mates began calling him Bing Bong, half in humor, half in admiration. He was the steady center in a storm. One mechanic said, "He didn't fly angry. He flew like he was painting a line in the sky." By late 1943, Bong's confidence had grown, and so had his score. But the Pacific skies were only getting busier. New Japanese reinforcements were arriving. Their tactics were changing. The air battles were becoming larger and faster, and soon even the mighty P-38 would show its weaknesses. The war was evolving, and Bong would have to evolve with it. The next lesson wouldn't come from the enemy, it would come from his own plane, a machine both brilliant and dangerous. The same aircraft that gave him his edge would soon test his control and nearly take his life. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning was not just another fighter plane, it was a strange, beautiful machine that looked like something from the future. With 2 engines, 2 long booms, and a single pilot pod in the center, it didn't resemble anything else in the sky. To many new pilots, it looked powerful but intimidating. To Richard Bong, it looked like perfection. He once said, "She feels heavy on the ground, but in the air she dances." The Lightning was fast, over 400 miles per hour, and could climb higher and dive faster than most Japanese planes. Its 4.50 caliber machine guns and 20 mm cannon were all mounted in the nose, giving it deadly accuracy. Unlike other fighters, it didn't need to angle its wings for convergence. If Bong could put the enemy in his sights, he knew his bullets would hit exactly where he aimed. But this gift came with danger. The P-38 had a problem few other planes faced: compressibility. When it dove too fast, usually past 500 miles per hour, air pressure trapped the controls, locking the plane into its dive. Many young pilots died trying to pull up, only to slam into the ocean or jungle. The Lightning was a masterpiece of engineering, but it was also a machine that demanded absolute respect. Bong learned this the hard way. During a mission in 1943, he chased a Japanese Zero through a cloud bank. When he emerged, his plane was shaking violently. The altimeter spun wildly downward. He was in a dive so steep that the stick refused to move. For a moment, Bong thought it was over. But then he remembered a training note from Lockheed engineers. "Reduce power. Don't fight it. Let the plane slow itself." He pulled back the throttles, waited, and prayed. At 5,000 feet, the controls loosened. He leveled out just above the treetops, heart pounding. When he landed, the mechanics found paint burned off the tail from the air friction. He smiled weakly and said, "She just wanted to fly faster than I could think." From that day, Bong respected the Lightning like a living creature. He knew its strength and its traps. It could outclimb anything in the Pacific, but in tight turns it was no match for a Zero. Its twin engines made it reliable, but also heavier, meaning it needed careful control during dogfights. He began teaching new pilots how to use its power wisely. He told them, "Don't try to dance with a Zero, hit and run, one clean pass, and get out." The P-38 also had another advantage: range. It could fly over 1,300 miles with drop tanks, almost double that of Japanese fighters. That meant the Lightning could strike deep behind enemy lines, attack bombers, and still return home. Bong used that reach to protect bombers heading to Rabaul, one of Japan's strongest bases. There, over the volcano-shaped island, he began perfecting his now famous deflection trick. Instead of chasing enemy planes from behind, Bong fired from an angle, predicting where the enemy would be a split second later. It was like throwing a baseball ahead of a running man. At first, others thought it was luck. Then they saw his gun camera footage. Every burst was short, controlled, and deadly precise. An intelligence officer said, "He wastes nothing, not fuel, not bullets, not motion." Still, the Lightning tested every pilot's nerve. The cockpit was small and often reached over 120 degrees Fahrenheit during missions. Fuel fumes and gun smoke filled the air, burning the eyes. The metal floor became so hot that some pilots flew barefoot just to keep their feet from blistering. And when it rained, which was often in the tropics, visibility dropped to almost nothing. Flying felt like balancing between sky and death. But Bong stayed calm. He trusted his hands, his instincts, and his aircraft. To him, the P-38 wasn't just a tool, it was a partner. He often said, "She'll take care of you if you take care of her." By mid-1943, Bong's skill with the Lightning had made him a legend among his peers. His superiors noticed too. They began using his tactics in training manuals for new pilots arriving in the Pacific. He didn't see himself as a teacher, but his example spoke louder than any order. However, every legend carries a shadow. With every victory came more attention and more risk. The press back home began calling him America SIP's ace of aces. Commanders wanted to protect him, but Bong wasn't done fighting. He believed he still had more to learn and more skies to conquer. Soon his calm precision would face its greatest test yet, not against the plane's limits, but against the limits of human endurance. The war was about to grow even larger, the battles deadlier, and Bong's quiet mastery would have to survive a storm no one saw coming. By 1944, Richard Bong was no longer just a good pilot. He was becoming something rare, a master of air combat. But mastery didn't come from pride or luck. It came from learning again and again that every mistake in the sky was paid for in blood. He said once, "A pilot doesn't beat his enemy, he beats his own fear." Bong studied every battle like a school lesson. After each mission he sat with the gunnery camera, rewinding the black and white film again and again. He counted frames, measured angles, and timed how long he fired. He discovered that the best shots lasted less than 1 second. Any longer, and the plane shook too much, bullets sprayed wide, and the guns overheated. He told a fellow pilot, "If you shoot for 2 seconds, you set not aiming, you set guessing." The mechanics noticed his habits. While others rested or smoked, Bong would be cleaning his guns, adjusting his sight, and checking bullet belts for damage. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his advice was simple: wait until you feel it. Don't rush the trigger, let the plane tell you when. To him, flying wasn't about aggression, it was about rhythm and timing. Every burst, every turn, every dive had a purpose. He also learned how to use the Pacific weather as a weapon. Thick clouds could hide entire squadrons. Sun glare could blind a pilot or reveal him. Bong often climbed above the clouds and waited until the Japanese fighters passed below. Then he would dive through the mist, firing at perfect angles, and vanish again before they could react. It looked almost supernatural. 1 second he was invisible, the next, deadly. By spring, Bong's record had reached over 20 confirmed kills. That number made him one of America's top aces, but the pressure grew heavier. Other pilots now looked to him for guidance. He was still the same quiet farm boy at heart, yet men twice his age called him Sir. He didn't to like being treated as a hero. He once wrote, "I'm just trying to get everyone home." The Japanese still had skilled pilots, but their losses were mounting. Many of their new flyers were undertrained, thrown into combat after only a few hours in the air. Bong noticed the change. He could tell from a distance who was experienced and who was new. He said, "You can see fear in the way a man turns his plane." Still, even with skill and experience, the danger never faded. Every flight carried risk, mechanical failure, weather, or a lucky enemy bullet. On one mission, his P-38's left engine was hit by shrapnel. He shut it down and glided almost 70 miles on one engine, landing with smoke trailing behind him. When his crew chief asked how he stayed calm, Bong shrugged. "I've seen worse weather back home," he said with a grin. His calmness began to seem almost unnatural. But deep down, Bong was human. He missed home, wrote long letters to his fiancée Marge Vattendahl, and taped her photo inside his cockpit. Other pilots joked that Marge was his good luck charm. Every time he flew with her picture, he came back safe. Soon he even had her photo painted on the nose of his P-38. It became one of the most famous fighter planes in the Pacific, the Marge. Despite his success, Bong never forgot the pilots who didn't return. He helped search for downed planes and sometimes marked their crash sites on maps for recovery crews. Each loss reminded him how thin the line between life and death could be. He told a friend, "You start counting kills, but after a while, you also count the empty chairs." By mid-1944, Bong Sep's skill had turned into legend. He reached 28 victories, breaking Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record and becoming America's top ace. News spread fast. Newspapers called him the farm boy who outflew the empire. Back home, schools taught his story to children, and the army printed his face on posters. But Bong himself stayed modest. When asked about his secret, he said, "It's Sep's not about killing planes, it's Sep's about keeping my friends alive." The attention brought new problems. Commanders wanted to pull him off the front lines before fame turned into tragedy. But Bong refused. He said he'd stop fighting only when the war was won, or when he ran out of fuel. He didn't know that the next missions would push him to his limits, not just as a pilot, but as a man. Ahead lay the Balikpapan raids, some of the most dangerous air battles of the Pacific. There, Bong's calmness, patience, and deadly precision would face the ultimate test. The sky would burn with oil and fire, and one wrong move could turn his machine and his legend into ash. October 1944. The sky above Balikpapan, Borneo looked calm at first, blue and endless. But beneath it, one of the biggest oil refineries in Southeast Asia was burning. American bombers had come to destroy Japan's last major fuel supply, and the Japanese were ready to defend it with everything they had left. Major Richard Bong, now flying his famous P-38 Marge, led his squadron toward the target. He could already smell the thick, oily smoke rising from below. It mixed with the sharp metallic scent inside his cockpit, the smell of fuel, sweat, and gun grease. The air shimmered with heat, and the radio crackled with short, tense voices. Ahead, Bong saw dark specks climbing fast, Japanese fighters. Dozens of them. Zeros, Oscars, and Togos, all heading straight for the American bombers. For most pilots, this would be a nightmare. But for Bong, it was a pattern, a deadly dance he had practiced 100 times. He called out calmly, "Keep your height, wait for my mark." The squadron stayed silent. They trusted him completely. When Bong spoke, men listened, not because he shouted, but because he never wasted words. At 25,000 feet, Bong tilted his plane slightly to the right. The sun now sat behind him, its glare blinding the Japanese below. He used that moment to dive. The P-38's twin engines roared, and the world blurred past his canopy. He aimed through the gun sight, waited for the lead Zero to cross his line, and fired. 5 guns spoke at once. A single burst of fire. In less than a second, the Zero exploded in a flash of orange. Bong didn't watch it fall. He had already moved to the next target. He fired again, short and sharp, and another plane broke apart. He fired again, short and sharp, and another plane broke apart. The Japanese tried to turn tightly, hoping to trap him in close combat. But Bong never turned with them. He climbed, dove, and struck again from above. Every move was planned. Every shot measured. His bursts lasted less than a heartbeat, 1/3 of a second, sometimes less. Below him, the oil tanks exploded as the bombers hit their marks. Flames rolled across the sea like molten glass. The heat reached up to the clouds, shaking Bong's plane with violent turbulence. He wiped sweat from his forehead and checked his ammo. Only 40 rounds left, enough for one more clean kill. Then suddenly a burst of gunfire ripped through his right wing. The plane jolted. An engine warning light flashed red. He was hit. "Engine 1 out," Bong reported over the radio, his voice steady. He shut down the damaged motor, feathered the propeller, and kept flying on one engine. Any other pilot might have broken off and returned to base. But below him, He saw the bombers being chased by a fresh wave of enemy fighters. He couldn't set leave them. He turned back into the fight, one engine screaming for mercy. A Zero lined up behind him and opened fire. Bong rolled sharply left, flipped the plane into a steep dive, and pulled the trigger once more. The Zero burst into flames. Then he leveled off and began the long flight home, slow, wounded, but alive. When he landed, the ground crew ran forward in shock. His P-38 looked half destroyed, holes in the wing, burned paint, one engine barely hanging on. Bong climbed out calmly and smiled. "She flies better than she looks," he joked. He had destroyed 4 enemy planes that day, while flying on one engine. After that mission, his name spread across every base in the Pacific. Even General George Kenney, his commander, shook his head in disbelief. He told reporters, "If Bong wasn't set real, we set have to invent him." But Bong didn't that feel like a hero. He wrote to Marge that night, "I don't think about records. I think about getting the boys home. Sometimes that's harder than fighting the enemy." By December 1944, Bong's official total reached 40 confirmed kills. It was the highest in US history, a record that still stands today. When he landed from that last mission, Kenney met him on the runway and said, "You still done, Richard? That's an order." Bong protested, but the general refused. The war still raged, but America couldn't risk losing its top ace. Bong was sent home to train new pilots and inspire war bomb drives. The Pacific skies would never again see the Marge in combat. As he watched other fighters take off without him, Bong felt strange, proud yet restless. He had given everything he had to the war. And though his battles were over, his next flight, one that would take him into the jet age, was already waiting. By early 1945, Major Richard Bong was back in the United States. The war still raged in the Pacific, but the Army had decided their best pilot would no longer fly in combat. To the generals, Bong was too valuable as a symbol, a living legend, proof of American skill and courage. But to Bong, being grounded felt like a punishment. He was sent across the country to speak at war bond rallies and visit factories where workers built planes and engines. Everywhere he went, people cheered. Children handed him drawings of airplanes. Women pinned flowers to his uniform. Reporters called him America Sits, Ace of Aces. At first, Bong smiled for the cameras, gave short speeches, and thanked the crowds. But deep down he missed the sound of the engines, the smell of gun oil, and the quiet hum of the P-38 cockpit before battle. The life of a hero was loud and lonely. He often told people, "I know better than the other boys out there." He meant it. He knew that many of his friends were still fighting and dying thousands of miles away. He had survived, but part of him still lived in those tropical skies. In February 1945, Bong finally married Marge, the girl whose photo had flown with him through every mission. Their wedding in Wisconsin was small but joyful. After years of fear and war, they finally had peace, or so it seemed. Photos from that day show Bong smiling shyly beside Marge, wearing his dress uniform, his Medal of Honor glinting in the sun. But even as he celebrated, the war was changing fast. New jet planes were being built, faster, higher, and more dangerous than any propeller aircraft. America's first operational jet fighter, the P-80 Shooting Star, had just entered testing. And Lockheed, the company that built Bong's beloved P-38 Lightning, asked him to help test the new jet. To Bong, it felt like destiny. He had mastered one generation of flight, now he would help shape the next. He accepted immediately. In May 1945, he moved to Burbank, California, and began working as a test pilot for Lockheed. Flying the P-80 was completely different from anything he had known. There was no propeller noise, just the deep roar of a jet engine. The plane was sleek, fast, and futuristic. It could reach speeds over 500 miles per hour, almost 100 miles faster than the Lightning. But it was also dangerous. Jet engines were new technology, and failures were common. Bong treated it with the same calm discipline he had used in war. He studied every system, memorized every safety step, and flew cautiously. Other pilots admired his patience. One engineer recalled, "He didn't set rush. He made flying look easy, like always." Still, Marge worried. She knew what test flying meant, constant risk. But Bong reassured her, "I still be fine. These planes need to fly before the war ends. It's such important work." By August 1945, the world was changing faster than anyone could believe. Germany had already surrendered in Europe. In the Pacific, Japan was collapsing under heavy bombing. Many believed the war would end any day. On the morning of August 6th, Bong prepared for another test flight over California. The sun was bright. Ground crews checked the fuel pumps and controls. Bong climbed into the P-80's narrow cockpit, strapped in, and smiled at his crew chief. He pushed the throttle forward, and the jet roared to life. Moments later, it lifted off from the Lockheed Air Terminal in Burbank. But within seconds, something went wrong. The fuel pump failed, and the jet engine lost power. At such low altitude, Bong had almost no time to react. He tried to restart the engine. Nothing. He tried to eject, but the plane was already too close to the ground. Witnesses on the runway saw the jet fall, trailing smoke. It hit a house and exploded in a burst of flame. Major Richard Bong, America's most successful fighter pilot, was gone. He was only 24 years old. The same day, thousands of miles away, an American B-29 bomber dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The explosion began a new age of warfare, and Bong's death was pushed off the front pages by the news of the atomic weapon. For many Americans, the timing felt unreal. The world's best fighter pilot died on the same day the world saw a weapon that would end dogfighting forever. One era of flight ended, and another began. In his hometown of Poplar, Wisconsin, the news hit like a storm. Marge received the telegram just hours after seeing headlines about Hiroshima. Neighbors came to her door with flowers and tears. She said softly, "He always wanted to fly. He died doing what he loved." The war would soon be over. But for the people who knew Richard Bong, and for every pilot who studied his calm precision, his lessons would never fade. His life proved that real heroes don't chase glory. They master fear, respect their machines, and fight only when they must. When news of Richard Bong's death spread across America, people were stunned. He had survived more than 200 combat missions, faced hundreds of enemy fighters, and destroyed 40 Japanese planes, all without a single crash in battle. Yet he was killed not by war, but by a test flight on a clear California morning. In Poplar, Wisconsin, the small town where he was born, bells rang and flags flew at half-staff. His parents, Carl and Dora Bong, sat quietly on their porch as neighbors brought food, flowers, and stories. Everyone in town had a memory of Richie, the quiet farm boy who once milked cows before sunrise and fixed tractors after school. Now he was gone, but his legend had already begun. Newspapers across the country called him the Gentle Warrior. President Harry S. Truman sent a personal message to his family, praising Bong-sek's extraordinary courage and devotion. Military bases held moments of silence. At Lockheed, engineers paused work and placed a single wreath near the crashed test site. But while Bong's story might have ended, his influence did not. His methods, calmness, and teamwork changed how pilots trained and fought. His commander, General George Kenney, said later, "Bong showed that discipline could win battles faster than raw aggression." It became a rule across air forces worldwide: control wins over chaos. In the years after the war, as America entered the jet age, Bong's name became a symbol of humility and excellence. Airfields, bridges, and schools were named after him. In 1955, Wisconsin built the Richard I. Bong Memorial Bridge, one of the longest in the state, connecting Superior, Wisconsin to Duluth, Minnesota. Every driver crossing it would see his name and remember the boy who once dreamed of flying. Even in classrooms, his story inspired young Americans. Teachers told students how Bong never bragged, never acted like a celebrity, and always shared credit with his crew. He often said, "Without my ground men, I couldn't shoot down a single plane." That honesty made him a hero people could actually relate to, not larger than life, but deeply human. In 1947, when the US Air Force became its own branch separate from the Army, the Air Force wanted pilots who were not just brave, but smart, professionals who understood teamwork and technology. Many officers called Bong the first of the modern airmen. Marge, his wife, carried his memory with quiet dignity. She later helped open the Richard Bong Veterans Historical Center in Superior, Wisconsin. There, Bong's medals, flight jacket, and even the photo of Marge that he carried in his cockpit are displayed behind glass. Visitors still come from around the world to see the museum and learn about the farm boy who became America's top ace. Bong's story was more than military glory. It was a story about character. He proved that skill and kindness could live in the same man. He never let fame change him. He never forgot where he came from. He never stopped thanking the mechanics who fixed his plane or the cooks who fed him in muddy camps. That quiet respect earned him as much honor as his medals. There was another paradox in his story. Bong fought in a war that demanded destruction, yet his greatest legacy was in building understanding. He taught pilots discipline. He inspired engineers to make safer planes. He reminded civilians that courage is not just about battle, but about doing what's right, even when no one is watching. In the decades after his death, Bong's name appeared in flight manuals, airfields, and memorial speeches. During the Korean War, some jet pilots wrote his name on their helmets for luck. In Vietnam, old veterans told young aviators, "Fly like Bong, calm, clean, and careful." Even now, in the 21st century, his lessons remain. Modern fighter pilots study his missions to understand what made him so effective. Historians note that he succeeded not because of speed or aggression, but because of precision. That was his secret. A farm boy's patience turned into a pilot's genius. Back in Poplar, the sky is quiet now. But each year, when old P-38 Lightnings fly during air shows, their silver wings glint in the sunlight just as Bong's once did over the Pacific. The crowd looks up, and for a moment, time folds back. It feels as if Bong is still there, watching over them, calm and steady as ever. His life was short, only 24 years. But his story stretched across generations. He didn't seek fame or fortune. He simply wanted to fly, to do his duty, and to come home safe. That was the paradox of Richard Bong, a man who destroyed 40 enemy planes, yet never lost his humanity. And in that, his victory never ended. In the years after World War II, America changed faster than anyone could imagine. Cities grew, jet planes filled the skies, and a new kind of war, the Cold War, began. But even as the world looked forward, many people still looked back and remembered the quiet farm boy from Wisconsin who had once ruled the Pacific skies. His name, Major Richard Bong, became part of American history. When young pilots joined the Air Force in the 1950s, instructors often told his story. They showed pictures of the smiling pilot beside his P-38 and said, "This man didn't win because he was reckless. He won because he stayed calm." They wanted new pilots to learn that bravery was not shouting or boasting. It was control. Bong's way of flying became the model: stay focused, trust your training, and never waste a bullet. In Poplar, the Bong family home turned into a small museum. Visitors walked through the rooms where Bong once read aviation magazines and built model planes. Kids looked at the photos of his dogfights, and old veterans stood quietly, remembering their own days in the war. The air smelled of pine and old wood, and through the open windows came the sound of wind, the same wind Bong had once listened to as a boy. People often said it was strange. A man who brought down 40 planes was also one of the gentlest souls they'd ever met. That was the paradox at the heart of his story. He fought fiercely, yet hated killing. He was a warrior, yet his dream was peace. He once told a reporter, "If this war ends soon, I still just go home and fly for fun." He never got that chance, but his dream outlived him. By the 1960s, America was sending astronauts into space. Some of them, like Neil Armstrong, had grown up reading about Bong. They said he was one of the reasons they wanted to fly. The idea that an ordinary farm boy could become a national hero showed that greatness could come from anywhere. Meanwhile, the Richard I Bong Veterans Historical Center kept growing. Families brought their children to learn about courage and duty. The center displayed his Medal of Honor, his flight gear, and even a life-sized model of his P-38 Lightning, Marge. Tour guides told visitors that Bong's calm courage helped win air superiority in the Pacific, saving thousands of American lives. Every year on August 6th, the anniversary of his death, people gather there. Some are veterans. Some are students. Some never met him but feel like they know him. A small band plays the national anthem, and someone reads from his letters. Then they look up at the sky and release white balloons, one for each plane he shot down. The balloons drift upward, glowing in the sunlight, until they disappear among the clouds. It is a peaceful ceremony, quiet, respectful, full of gratitude. And it reminds everyone of something Bong once said: "Courage isn't said about being fearless. It's said about doing your job even when you said afraid." His story also reminds people of the bigger truth about war. It creates heroes, but it also takes them away too soon. It pushes humans to their limits, but also reveals their best qualities: loyalty, sacrifice, and compassion. Bong showed that strength and kindness could live in the same heart. In history books, he is listed as America's top fighter ace of World War II, with 40 confirmed aerial victories and over 200 combat missions. But numbers alone cannot explain his greatness. What made him truly unforgettable was his character, the same gentle patience he learned from milking cows, fixing machines, and listening to his father's advice on the farm. That simple honesty carried him through war, fame, and tragedy. Decades later, pilots still fly with his name on their lips. Some paint his nickname on their jets. Others quote his motto, "You can win every fight, but you can fly every one with honor." Even drone pilots in modern air bases have seen his portrait on the walls, a reminder that behind every machine there must still be a human heart. So when people talk about the heroes of World War II, the generals, the soldiers, the codebreakers, they often return to Bong. He didn't lead armies or invent weapons. He led by example. He showed that even in a world of fire and steel, kindness could still win respect. In the end, Richard Bong's greatest victory was not in the number of planes he destroyed, but in the way he lived. He stayed humble, loyal, and brave until the last second. He turned fear into focus and skill into something almost poetic. And though the man is gone, the sky still remembers his name, because every time a jet breaks through the clouds, calm, steady, and sure, it echoes the spirit of a farm boy from Wisconsin who once taught the world that real strength is quiet.